He always believed that all religions were the same. Different names, different rituals, different holy books, but in the end, they all pointed to the same basic message. That's what he was taught. That's what he repeated. In his eyes, religion was simply a tool, something people used to feel better, to give life some structure, to find a little hope in a difficult world. He didn't hate religion. He just didn't see the point of comparing them. Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, Islam, they were all saying more or less the same thing. Be kind, be honest, do good, avoid harm. So why choose one? Why dig deeper? He thought this way for years. Whenever religion came up, he'd say, all paths lead to the same truth. And if someone spoke about Islam in particular, he'd quickly brush it off. I respect it, he'd say, but it's no different from any other. He had never read the Qur'an. He had never spoken to a practicing Muslim in depth. But that didn't matter to him. He was confident in his conclusion. And in his heart, he believed that anyone claiming their religion to be the absolute truth was just being narrow-minded. But one evening changed that forever. He was having dinner with a Muslim friend when the topic of faith came up. As usual, he repeated his view that all religions were basically the same. His friend didn't argue, he didn't push. He simply said, "Can I show you just one verse from the Qur'an?" Curious but skeptical, he agreed. His friend opened a translation and pointed to a verse. He read it slowly, and for the first time in his life, a sentence didn't just land in his mind, it landed in his soul. The verse wasn't vague, it wasn't poetic fluff, it was direct, clear, heavy. It felt like it was describing him, his thoughts, his doubts, his pain. He read it again, slower this time, and suddenly his eyes welled up. He couldn't explain it. The words weren't designed to impress, they were designed to awaken, and they did. That one verse broke something inside him, a wall he didn't know he had, a certainty he didn't know was fragile. He had spent years thinking Islam was just another path, but now he realized he had never actually looked at it. He had never listened with an open heart. He had never asked, what if this is actually from the one who made me? And the Qur'an didn't come to debate him, it came to speak to him, to call him, to heal him. That night, he didn't walk away with answers. He walked away with a question. What if this is the truth I've been running from all along? And from that moment forward, he couldn't unsee what he had seen. One verse had done what years of thought never could. It had broken the illusion of all religions are the same and replaced it with something deeper. Truth that speaks directly to the soul. He had spent most of his life believing that all religions were essentially equal, different in language, customs, and symbols, but deep down saying the same thing. He was taught to respect all faiths, but also to never commit to any. In his world, choosing one religion over others felt like choosing sides in a world that was already too divided. So he floated in a neutral space, never against religion, but never willing to step into one fully. To him, Islam was just one more voice in a global choir of beliefs. Just another religion among many. He had heard about Islam from media, books, and documentaries. 5 prayers a day, fasting in Ramadan, belief in one God, prophets, angels, the afterlife. These concepts didn't strike him as unique. He thought Christians pray too, Jews fast, Hindus believe in spiritual order. It's all the same message, dressed in different clothing. His heart was closed, not out of arrogance, but from a quiet confidence that he had already figured it out. The entrance of the spot said he was here, and the meetings and funerals and masses and all the comments of the days graced in the family was forever. Why dive deeper into one path when all rivers lead to the same sea? But behind that confidence was a restlessness, a spiritual numbness. He had moments of silence at night or stillness after a long day, where he wondered if he had missed something. There were times when his heart felt empty despite having everything he wanted on paper. He tried reading quotes from different religions, hoping to find something that would stir his soul. But everything felt too general, too vague, too repetitive. It was like standing before a buffet of beliefs. Everything looked fine, but nothing truly satisfied. Then one evening, during a casual conversation, a Muslim friend offered something different. Not a lecture, not a debate, just a verse. "Read this," he said, sliding over a copy of the Qur'an in English. He glanced down, expecting something abstract or ceremonial. But what he read was piercing. The words were personal. They didn't float in metaphor. They struck with clarity. It felt as if someone had read his thoughts and poured them into those lines. It didn't feel like an old scripture. It felt like a voice, timeless and alive, reaching through the pages and speaking directly to his soul. For the first time, he felt seen, not by a person, but by something higher. He couldn't stop thinking about the verse. Long after the conversation ended and he had gone home, its words kept echoing in his mind. It wasn't just the content, it was how it made him feel. It was like a mirror had been placed in front of him, one that reflected not his face, but his soul. It called out his doubts, his emptiness, his quiet fear that life had no deeper meaning. He had read books, listened to talks, and explored spiritual traditions before, but nothing had spoken to him like this. That one verse was simple, but it carried a force he couldn't explain. It didn't demand anything from him. It didn't push. It simply revealed, and he wasn't ready for that. He opened the Quran again the next day, not out of curiosity, but out of a strange longing. He wanted to know if the feeling he had experienced was a coincidence or something more. As he turned the pages, verse after verse seemed to strike something within him. Some spoke of the heavens and the earth, others of the heart and the soul. Some described the arrogance of those who turned away from truth, others the peace of those who submitted to their Creator. He didn't understand every word, but he understood the feeling. It was the feeling of being spoken to, not by a human, but by a higher voice. One verse in particular left him frozen. Indeed, in the remembrance of Allah do hearts find rest. Qur'an 13:28. He read it again and again. His heart had been searching for rest for so long, in distractions, entertainment, friendships, and even philosophy, but here, in a single line, was the answer. It didn't offer a new theory, it offered the truth he had been running from. That his soul wasn't just hungry, it was homesick. He sat for a long time after that, no phone, no noise, just him and the quiet. And in that silence, he realized that what he once called just another religion was in fact something far greater. Islam wasn't speaking like the rest. It wasn't giving him a suggestion. It was giving him a lifeline. And his heart, for the first time, was listening. He never expected to feel this way. The Quran was just a book to him, an ancient text from a distant culture. But now, with every verse he read, it felt like the pages were reading him instead. There was something different about it. It didn't speak in riddles or detached philosophy. It spoke with purpose, like it knew the heart it was addressing. He kept returning to the verse that had broken him the night before, unsure why it hit so deeply. But the more he sat with it, the more it revealed. The words didn't just tell a story, they opened a door, and once that door opened, he couldn't go back to seeing things the same way. He began to notice how Islam wasn't just a belief system, it was a direct dialogue between the soul and its creator. Everything in it pointed inward. The way Muslims pray, how they fast, how they speak, even how they eat. It all flowed from a place of remembrance. It wasn't performance, it was presence. And that presence felt missing from his life. He had chased success, entertainment, and validation, but none of it reached his soul like this one book now did. He couldn't explain it logically, and yet it felt more real than anything he'd experienced before. He started asking his Muslim friend questions, not to argue, but to understand. Why do Muslims pray 5 times a day? Why do they fast? Why do they place their heads on the ground in sujood? The answers shocked him, not because they were complex, but because they were so simple and sincere. They do it for love, for peace, to surrender to the one who made them, to return to him again and again through each breath, each bow, each moment. It wasn't about following rules. It was about being close to the one who knows. Every silent cry, that was what made him cry again. Not because he was sad, but because, for the first time, he wasn't alone. He realized the thing he had mocked, avoided, and dismissed was the very thing his heart had been searching for all along. Not religion as routine, but revelation as healing. The words he once brushed aside had become the voice his soul couldn't live without. He had once been proud of how open-minded he was. He believed he had seen the world clearly, by standing above it, detached, comparing all beliefs without committing to any. But now, as he read more of the Qur'an and spent time with Muslims who actually lived their faith, he began to feel that his so-called neutrality had been a quiet form of arrogance. He had never allowed himself to look deeper, to ask, what if I've been wrong? For years, he treated religion like a buffet. Take what you like, ignore what you don't. But Islam didn't offer that kind of comfort. It offered something far more challenging and beautiful, truth. And the truth didn't come with smooth words or emotional manipulation. It came with clarity, with courage, with direct questions that pierced through doubt. He read verses that asked him, do you think you were created without purpose? And will they not reflect upon the Quran? And he realized something. Islam wasn't begging for followers. It was inviting sincere seekers. The Quran didn't ask him to blindly believe. It asked him to think, to look at the sky, to examine his soul, to consider life and death and what comes after. No other text had ever spoken to both his heart and his mind like this. The more he read, the more the world around him made sense. The chaos, the emptiness, the hunger for more. It was all described in the words of the Quran. But it didn't just point to the disease. It offered the cure. It spoke about patience, purpose, prayer, and peace. Not as distant ideas, but as daily realities. He saw how Islam wasn't only for the mosque, it was for the marketplace, the kitchen, the street, the heart. It wasn't a religion you practiced once a week. It was a way of life, rooted in submission to the one who knows you better than you know yourself. He remembered the night he first said, all religions are the same. Now, that sentence felt hollow, because what he had experienced through Islam was not the same. It was deeper, it was truer, and it was something no comparison could dismiss. What he once saw as just another religion had now become the light that cleared the fog around his soul. He couldn't sleep anymore. That verse kept playing in his mind like a whisper he couldn't shut out. Do they not reflect? He did reflect. He reflected deeply, and what he saw terrified and healed him at the same time. His entire life he had called himself spiritual. He had read Buddhist sayings, meditated, admired Christian teachings, quoted motivational speakers, but none of them ever made him cry. None of them ever made him feel seen by the one who made him. Until now, one verse had undone years of confidence. It shattered the illusion that all beliefs were equal, not because others had no beauty, but because this was different. The Qur'an didn't ask for praise. It asked for truth. It didn't invite him to emotion, it invited him to submission. It exposed the lies he had told himself for years, that he didn't need direction, that he could build his own truth, that all paths eventually meet. But what if that wasn't true? What if some paths only lead in circles while one path leads to home? He now saw that Islam wasn't simply giving him ideas, it was giving him answers. He saw Muslims turning to prayer not because they had to, but because their hearts couldn't survive without it. He saw people fast not just to obey, but to purify. He saw Islam not as a cage, but as a compass. The discipline he once called restriction now looked like freedom. Freedom from the world, from ego, from confusion. He had mocked religion before, but now with every breath, he was praying silently, even without realizing. Guide me. That became the quiet cry of his soul. He hadn't taken Shahada yet. He hadn't stood on the prayer mat yet, but he knew something in him had already bowed. And in that unseen sujood, the one only Allah saw, a broken man began to heal. Because it wasn't just a verse, it was his verse. And it didn't argue with him, it didn't shout, it didn't defend. It simply waited for his heart to soften, for his eyes to open, for the truth to be heard, not in noise, but in silence. And in that silence, he had finally heard Allah's call. He began to change, slowly and silently, not with grand declarations or dramatic announcements, but with small shifts of the heart. Every day felt different now. The same streets he walked looked different. The same questions he had carried for years felt lighter. He hadn't converted officially yet, but something inside him already had. The way he looked at life, death, time, and even people, it all started to align with what he had been reading, feeling, and hearing through the Qur'an. He started waking up earlier, not for work, not for a schedule, but because something in him longed for the peace he saw in Fajr, the pre-dawn prayer Muslims performed while the world still slept. He'd sit in his room, lights dimmed, Qur'an translation open on his lap, heart beating a little faster each time he turned a page. Some verses he didn't understand. Some confused him, but others felt like they were written just for him, especially the ones about hearts. Broken hearts, lost hearts, seeking hearts, and the promise that Allah guides whom He wills. He found himself crying more, not out of sadness, but out of relief. Because the burden of figuring everything out alone was finally lifting. Islam wasn't giving him 100 answers, it was giving him one. Return to Allah. Everything else would follow. He didn't need to know the entire religion in one day. He just needed to surrender sincerely. The rest would come. The prayer, the guidance, the community, the peace. It was all waiting on the other side of that one step. One evening, while sitting under the stars, he whispered the Shahada to himself. Not for anyone else to hear, not for a crowd to witness, but just between him and Allah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. He cried afterward, because even though the world didn't change around him, something inside him did. He wasn't floating anymore. He wasn't searching blindly. He wasn't comparing religions. He had found the one that spoke both to his pain and to his purpose. And it all started with one verse. One line that pierced through years of pride and doubt. A verse that didn't scream, but whispered. That didn't argue, but healed. And through it, he found what he never knew he was missing. Truth. He started this journey thinking all religions were the same, just different paths to the same end. But what he found in Islam wasn't just another path, It was the truth that knew his heart before he even asked the questions. It wasn't about comparison anymore. It wasn't about who was right and who was wrong. It was about what finally reached his soul. And that wasn't philosophy, that wasn't culture, that wasn't emotion, it was the Qur'an. Clear, honest, fearless, and full of mercy. The verse that changed his life didn't come with force, it came with light. A light that exposed everything he didn't want to admit, and everything he had always been searching for. That's the beauty of Islam. It doesn't enter with noise. It enters in silence. It meets the soul when it's ready to listen. And when it enters, nothing stays the same. Thank you for watching this emotional journey. If it touched your heart, please share it with someone who's still searching. Because sometimes one verse is enough to change a life. And sometimes that one verse is waiting for you to read it too. May Allah guide every sincere seeker, soften every heart, and bless us all with the peace that only comes from knowing Him. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.